So there are always a few audio technical questions that people keep on asking because I think they are very difficult to answer. And today I'm going to do another shot at answering the question how to get bass under control, how to work with sub-frequencies, like the whole bass question that everybody is asking. So let's go. So there are a lot of people that have problems with mixing or mastering in the bass regions. So let's say everything below 200 Hertz or something. And I start to understand why that is. Because there are three very important things to take care of before you can accurately work on low frequencies. And those three things are monitoring, and monitoring. I mean, really. And with monitoring, I mean not only the speakers, but also the acoustics of the room. Because if I'm looking at the people that are asking questions about getting sub-frequencies under control, the unifying thing with them all is that their monitoring solution is not performing the way it should be performing, or is not performing on a quality level that is high enough. Now, monitoring in general is very important. I'm going to make a separate video about monitoring in a while. Maybe when these prototypes are finally finished, but that can take up to 2 years before that is going to be installed in my studio. And my studio needs kind of a rebuild for that. But in general, monitoring is super important. And one of the things that I start to distance myself from, one of the quotes that I start to distance myself from is the quote, "You have to know how your monitors sound." This is of course true, but we're using it in monitoring systems where we don't have to know how they sound. We have to compensate in our head for things that the monitoring system cannot do. For instance, if there's a cut of 6-7 dBs in a low frequency region, like we have a cut on 60 Hertz, we have to compensate for that in our heads, but we can't. We simply can't. It's super difficult to compensate for that, and you always need checking on different systems in order to know if you're doing the correct job. So it's very important to have a linear, well, first of all, frequency response in your low frequencies. And with linear, I mean, like try to get the peaks and the valleys within 2 decibels of each other. That's already a huge deal to get it like that. And of course, there's more to it. Like phase response is also important, but first focus on frequency response yourself. And you can do that, of course, by getting good speakers. And it's super important to not put too big of a speaker in too small of a room. It has to be working together. But even if you have a good speaker, but your room has a lot of, well, they call it room modes, or it's also called a com filter, then you have dead spots on your sweet spot and you need bass trapping. So what I'm trying to say is that without those things, it is nearly impossible to manage your bass accurately. I don't like to say this because I know that the things that I'm talking about are for a lot of people out of reach. And I'm in a certain position where I have good monitoring and I have good bass trapping and a good room to work in. So it might sound a bit ignorant and arrogant, but if I'm looking at the situation, that is how it is. A few examples are that sometimes I get students in here. I'm teaching for 2 schools, and I do individual lessons with them. And sometimes they bring their own production, and it's most of the times it's like, yeah, I'm trying to master this, but I can't, and something wrong with the bass and whatever. And then we plug in their laptop here on my speaker system, or we do something that we can listen to it. And it's more than often that we get presented with so much bass that it's like, oh, if I just lower it, then it's done. Like those issues. And it's just because they can't hear it at home or at whatever. So if you have this all managed, what you will see then is that it gets super easy. to work on bass frequencies, low frequencies. And interestingly enough, it already starts at the music production. So if it's an electronic production or an acoustic production, it doesn't even matter as much. Because it's a simple matter of, okay, if the kick and the bass are clashing in the production, then it needs to be tackled over there. We're not going to do like crazy small Q factor stuff in EQs if we can fix it in the production. Or we're not going to do multiband compression in the mastering if the problem lays in the production. We have to fix it in the production. That's what I'm always asking my clients. As soon as something comes up, that there's a clashing in the baseline or the kick baseline combination, because that's where the clashing goes on most of the times, I ask them to fix this. One of the issues that comes up a lot in electronic productions the most is the tail of the kick and the length of the baseline. When you have a long kick with a long tail, it's better to use a more staccato baseline. It's like a rule of thumb. I'm not saying this is the ultimate answer and that you should do this, but this works pretty well. Like long kick, short baseline. And also the other way around. Short kick, long baseline. Works really, really well. Now what I also see is that people produce a kick bass combination, and that is still clashing, although they're thinking that they're using a short kick and a long baseline. But then I play it back on here, and it turns out that the kick is like on 25 hertz or something. It's still very long-tailed. And that brings us back again to point one, monitoring. Like, if you can't hear what you're doing, you should work on that. It's the most important part of every studio. Making sure you can hear what you're doing. So yeah, then we move on to mixing. And I have a few tricks that I like to share with you guys in my DAW with a few plugins, so that you guys maybe get inspired to do something that to just make that bass combination stuff, that bass, that subloaded stuff way better, way more tight, way more whatever. So I got a pretty bass heavy song here, and I have it stamped out, so that gives me an extra challenge, but that's maybe interesting. Now the tips that I'm going to give, I'm right now not here to achieve like the perfect sound on this track. I'm here to inspire you guys for some techniques to get a better bass response. So I'm showing you different tricks that you can use, or maybe even combine to use. Here's the track that I'm talking about. Let's go to the bass heavy part directly. You can hear it's a pretty heavy part, but the bass and kick already, they are blending. What makes it difficult is that it's just the bass line itself, the production of the bass line. Almost an extra kick, like that makes it like a bit more restless in the low frequencies, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's the track. What you can do in order to make the kick and bass blend more in such a case is, first thing you can do is sidechain it. Sidechain it. Now I'm working with a stem with percussion in it, so let's only use the low frequencies of the percussion stem in the sidechain. Oh. But there's a problem when sidechaining a bass line in order to get a better low frequency response. You're already hearing it. We're pushing away the whole bass line, while we are actually having like some kind of cool crunch on it, which we want to maintain. I mean, it's only about the low frequency, the sub frequencies. So sidechaining is cool, and it's used creatively and both also to create some room in a production in a lot of cases. But in this case, I would rather prefer to, instead of using a compressor, to use a multiband compressor, and then create a big low frequency band, and then sidechain it from here. So I think the sidechain is still, yeah, the sidechain is already working. So I can put it on external sidechain, and I think it's only detecting here. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so like this. So let's focus on only, yeah. Now it's difficult to hear this when you're not having very good monitoring, and I'm not sure what the YouTube codec is doing, but let's just show you how it's blending. So So now the crunchiness of the bass line stays intact and only the low frequency is being pushed back just when the kick is playing. And it's also now filling up very nice in the place where the kick isn't playing. Of course, very extreme. I wouldn't do it this extreme in a mix. But for the demo, it's better to hear because it's difficult to hear. Here. So let's bypass it. So now I'm almost cutting all the low end away. Let's do it more subtle as I would do it. That's right. So you hear how the kick gets more room now. That's right. Now another technique is of course not doing it on individual channels, but doing it on a master bus. Of course, it has to blend together already pretty well. But if you're working on a master bus with, for instance, a multiband compressor with the low frequencies, I mean, the multiband is triggering to the full signal, so also to the kick that is coming in. So with this, you can equal out the amount of low frequencies in your track from a dynamic point of view way better. So it's not going up and down and sideways. Again, I like to do this with super fast attack and release time. So look ahead, full look ahead, everything. Like this. It's a bit extreme. Let's push it up so that's, yeah. It's difficult here, I know. Now it gets way more glued together because it's not only a matter of having all the frequencies in there, like summing up, but it's also about having the correct glue. And most of all, because when you're working with a limiter or master bus to push everything up a bit, it's good that your low frequencies are already compressed, because a limiter does have trouble with low frequencies. Most limiters have, not all, but I like to push it up. Now another trick, I showed this in my mastering tutorial as well, of which I'm going to make more, is using a frequency analyzer, spectrum analyzer, to look at where your bass is. So it's a good thing to use a spectrum analyzer to analyze the amount of bass that you're having. Now, if you're looking at a spectrum analyzer like this, it says nothing. So you have to know what you're looking at. First of all, the important part is the window that you're using, or the block size or whatever. It has to be big enough to accurately show you what you're doing in the low frequencies. Let me show you what happens when I make a smaller window like this. Now I don't know anything. Well, if I make a bigger window, here, look. Now I know some things that are going on. Now I can see things. Still doesn't say anything. We have to know the amount of low frequencies that is normal to have, that is good to have. And the way that I do this, the way that I test this, is I'm taking reference tracks, listening to them, like, is this something where I want to go? Is this what I like? Is this, whatever? And I'm going to determine where the low frequencies in those reference tracks are. Now, first of all, it's important that when you're playing back those reference tracks, that you're playing them back at peak volume of 0 dB, because we're looking at mastered tracks. Now, it's also important that you have to be mastering in order to know if your low frequencies are, like, if you have enough of them or not. Because if you don't, like, your mix will always be on a lower volume than the master of somebody else. So it's a bit difficult to determine this, and it takes some time and skill to really understand your analyzer. But what I now know is for dance music, I need to be at -24 on my analyzer. And it depends on a lot of different things where that sweet spot will be for you. Not only on the reference tracks and on what you prefer, but also really on how your analyzer works. So what could be -24 on my analyzer with my settings, with my routing and everything, could be -12 for you, or -36, or somewhere in between, or whatever. So it really takes some time to determine the amount of subfrequencies that you want to achieve in your production. And from that you can use an analyzer. And on the analyzer you can also really quickly see, like if you have a monitoring system that cannot handle like 20 or 30 hertz or whatever, you can really quickly see if you are having problems in that area. Again, given that your analyzer is accurate enough in the low end, and it really needs a big RTA window size, a really big, what do they call it here? Block size. Whatever. So this is really important, but you can see when it's not accurate. I just showed it to you guys. Now the last thing, I cannot demo this because I do not have a track in here, but I can quickly explain it, is listen and look at the continuity of your baseline. So this goes most of all with sine wave baselines. So if you have a sine wave baseline, what can happen? Because sine waves are really bad when your monitoring is not up to the maximum standards. What can happen is that one node of the sine wave is way louder than the other node. You can easily see this in like your analyzer in the FET filter or something. You can really see which ones are louder than the other ones. And you can also hear it when you have, there we go again, good monitoring. What you can do with those baselines is because it's only a few notes that most baselines are playing. When it's a sine wave, it's not very difficult. They're not playing super difficult parts, but you can, with a small Q factor filter, you can filter out the notes that are too loud, and you can lower them a bit with EQing. Again, it's fixing it in the mix, but sometimes that works. And I just wanted to give you guys that tip as well. Like I like to use the FET filter EQ because you can control everything on it, and you can really quickly see what you're doing. So that's one of the things that I would advise you guys to do as well. And that's actually it for my tips on baselines for now. I know that this might not be the answer that you're expecting of me. Maybe you were like expecting like some magical trick, but I don't believe in magic. I believe in theory. I believe in facts, and I believe in like audio theory and like professional audio and just doing a good job instead of trying to patch something up with some weird plugin, because in the end we're not learning from it, and that plugin might work on this track and then on the next track we're having a problem again. And I like to know like what is the basis, what's a solid theory and a solid way of working, so that I can attack this problem whenever it arises. But that's for me how I think of these things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't come across too rude about the monitoring solution, but at least it's honest, like you need good monitors. Anyway, let's not talk about that anymore. So thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe you have some good tips for the viewers, the other viewers as well. Leave them in the comments below if you want to share them, of course. Some people are really secretive of their approach. Anyway, if you want to support me and my videos and my studio, then it's possible by pledging to my Patreon campaign. I'm trying to give you guys some things in return, so take a look at Patreon over here. Now, another way to support me is by watching more videos. So I'll link one of them over here. Don't forget to subscribe, keep pushing, and bye-bye.